Hi guys, today I'm going to tell you the story of all the pictures that were shown in the first part of this video, the time-lapse on the French Riviera. So if you didn't see the first part, then you have to see it. So this first picture was taken in the cemetery of Crocodile in Nice. And it's a funeral of German soldiers. And what's pretty amazing with this picture is that it was sent to me by an American veteran who had been in Nice during the war, Carl Wikström. And I only ever met about 4 or 5 German veterans who had been in Nice during the war, and I sent this picture to them. So the picture that came from the United States, I sent it to the German veterans. And one of the German veterans was called Karl Siron, and I sent this picture to him, and he said, "You know what, this is me. This is me on this picture." And this picture shows a funeral of Reserve Grenadier Battalion 164, and I was part of this unit that was burying soldiers in the cemetery. And I recognized the other guys here. This was, Fettweber Fleischer. This guy here with the glasses was another guy he remembered. So that was really amazing to have a picture from the US, send it to Germany, and then the German recognized himself on the picture. And this is Karl Siron here. You can compare his faces. He was away at the back because he was, I think, only 1.54 m, so very small. That's why he was at the back of the company. This picture was taken at the castle in Lanapool, which is a nice place to swim nowadays. The German veteran who kept this picture, or who took the picture, was called Herbert Schulz from the 14th Company of Reserve Grenadier Regiment 239, and he was one of the lucky ones who survived the war. This is just a German propaganda picture, also taken at the castle in Lanapool by an official photographer, so I don't know any of the people on it. And this picture was taken at the bay in Villefranche. It's also a very famous place for tourists nowadays. The soldier on the right side was called Johann Meyer. He was 17 years old. What's kind of neat with this picture is that on this boat that they're messing around on, there's a death head and it says SS. So people ask me, like, what's that supposed to mean? Is this an SS boat? No, obviously this is not an SS boat. And I don't know what the guys were doing, but they were obviously just messing around when they took this picture and painted that SS on the boat. And this Johann Meyer was in Reserve Grenadier Battalion 164, and he was killed in an ambush by the French resistance between the villages of Leuvins and La Roquette-sur-Var on August 25th, 1944. This is another soldier from the same unit, so also Battalion 164. Kaspar Fischer is taken in near the port of Nice, and he was killed just 3 days later, August 28, 1944, when his entire company was surrounded by paratroopers of the 517th Parachute Infantry in the village of La Roquette-sur-Var. So 11 Germans were killed, the rest of the company was captured. He was buried in a mass grave with 10 of the other Germans, and his family never knew what happened to him until 1958, when the mass grave was exhumed and his body was found with his identification tag. And in that grave, of the 11 men, 8 have been identified, and of the 8, 7 of them were just 17 or 18 years old, so I don't know if we should say men or teenagers or children. Another interesting thing with his picture is that you can see that the French army took a propaganda picture at the exact same place in 1940 at the beginning of the war, above the port of Nice, and as you all know, it didn't bring the French army much luck. These are more pictures of Battalion 164. These ones were taken by a guy called Josef Kirchner. He survived the war. He was captured in 1945 in Italy. And this place is called the Villa Montana. It's now a luxurious residence in Nice, above the Loire River. This is in Monaco, or Monte Carlo, right in front of the casino and the theater. The guy who kept this picture was called Oberleutnant Johannes Bernsch. He's the guy on the right side drinking his beer. He was in Reserve Jäger Battalion 28. This is also taken near the casino and the theater in Monaco. And the German officer on this picture was called Lorenz Roth. In peacetime, he was a music composer, and he ended up on the French Riviera as a German officer of Reserve Division 148. So he decided to compose an opera, and then his officers told him, like, just go to the casino in Monaco and see if you can play that, and he managed to play it. So the opera was called Snow White, and at least he's one of the rare guys who seems to have had a really good time during the war. This guy here is called Gustav Schnur. He was 40 years old. He was a medic in the Festungspionier Battalion number 14, and he died of a heart attack, according to the German documents, on the morning of 11 July 1944 after the morning exercise. This guy here is called Rudolf Strozek of Battalion 164. This is also in Villefranche. He was, as you can see, staying in a luxurious villa that had been requisitioned by the Germans. And he actually left southern France before the invasion happened. He was sent to Normandy and he was captured in Normandy and he survived the war. This guy here is called Michael Mederer. He was in the pioneer unit, so that means engineer unit. This is taken on a bridge near the town of Sospel, and Mederer was killed very near this bridge, probably a few days after this picture was taken, by shell fragments to the head. This guy is called Bernard Laux. The picture is taken near Menton. He was a non-commissioned officer, a veteran, as you can see. The medal he has on his breast was the medal for having been in Russia during the winter of 1941. And this is 1944, so you can see he had been in the army a long time. He also has a wound badge, proving he had been wounded once before. And he was killed on September 15th, 1944, in the valley just a few kilometers away from where this picture was taken. This is taken in the cemetery in Caucade in Nice. It's a civilian cemetery that still exists nowadays. And the guy being buried on this day was called Friedrich Krumm. He was 37 years old. He was in the Reserve Grenadier Regiment number 8. And what always made me sad with this guy is that I contacted his family and they sent me this picture of him. This was the last picture he took on leave in Germany. You see he had 3 daughters. And one of the daughters, the one on the lower left, she moved and the picture is blurred where she is, you see. And I always figured it must have been quite sad for her to have her face blurred on the last picture that was taken of her father alive. And then these 2 pictures showing the executed partisans. Well, in the village of Gatière, the French resistance and the Germans had a little firefight. And 1 Frenchman was killed, 1 German was mortally wounded. So then the Germans took 2 known communists in the village and hung them in downtown Nice in July 1944. And this is the location where they were hung. Just here you can see, just before they get hung, a German soldier and one of the 2 partisans. Well, I'm not even sure if they were partisans, but anyway, they had been members of the Communist Party and stuff before the war. And now we get to the part about the liberation, all these parachutes. This is troopers of the 551st Parachute Infantry Battalion jumping into southern France on the afternoon of August 15th, 1944. In the early morning, troopers of the 517th and 509th had also jumped. This here shows troopers of A Company of the 517th. And what's interesting with this picture is that the second guy in line, Albert J. Ernst, 21 years old, he was killed just a day after this picture was taken in heroic circumstances. I think he received the Silver Star, if I'm not mistaken. And this shows the results of an ambush by the 517th against the Germans on the first day of the invasion. Now, to get to the comparisons again, this picture here shows troopers of B Company of the 509th Parachute Infantry in La Napoule. And this picture was taken just after 6 guys of the company had been killed, a whole bunch of other guys had been wounded, and 6 other men of the battalion had also been killed. And it's interesting to look at their faces, and some guys are smiling, one guy's looking at the ground, some guys are frowning or their eyes avoid the camera. This guy who is a medic, he's also smiling. So this is taken just after 6 of their friends had been killed. And one of the guys of B Company is on a very famous picture. His name was Burl Knapp. This picture was taken about August 16th or 17th, 1944. And he's one of the guys who was killed during this attack on the castle in Lanapool. This is the arrival of the first American vehicles in Cannes. This shows the port of Cannes, with boats that are sunk in the port and just the masts sticking out. And what's interesting with this picture is that the building in the background, this red building, this is now the palace of the Cannes Film Festival. So when you see famous film stars walking up the stairs in Cannes, they're actually walking up the stairs of this very building. And this is another picture showing how the Germans blew up the port of Cannes a few days before the Americans came. This is the port of Antibes, also a place that has lots of rich people's yachts and stuff nowadays. This shows paratroopers of the 517th at the Cascade de Courmes. This is of the whole lot of pictures, this was the hardest one to find where it had been taken. It was by complete chance one day I just went by the Cascade de Courmes and recognized that that's where this picture was taken. So they took this picture and then they had to climb up a really steep hill, actually a cliff. And when they got to the top of the cliff, they took this picture. This picture is also the 517th, of course, and one of the guys standing third from right is Marvin Moles, that we'll see in another picture later on. This picture is taken in Grasse. It shows a soldier called Howard Williams of 6th Company 2nd Regiment of the 1st Special Service Force. They were involved in heavy fighting in Villeneuve-Loubet just later on. And this is Villeneuve-Loubet. This shows a killed German soldier, and standing above him there's a Canadian, F.K. Robinson of 6th Company 2nd Regiment, 1st Special Service Force. What's kind of, I don't know what the word would be. I guess nowadays people would say shocking, but I don't think it's shocking. I'll say interesting again with this picture is that this guy took a picture with a dead German, and then the next guy also took a picture with a dead German, so they're just basically posing with the body. And the other thing that's, for me, very important in my personal relation with the war is that this German soldier who was killed, see, he was buried in a mass grave nearby in the town of Villeneuve-Loubet. And I actually found that mass grave years and years later in 2006. And there were 14 bodies in the grave, including that German soldier. Unfortunately, he's one of the ones that we didn't manage to identify. Only 8 of the bodies have been identified so far, so there's still 6 to be identified. And if you're interested to know more about this mass grave, you can watch my video about it. German mass grave in Villeneuve-Loubet, investigation results. This picture was taken in a famous hotel in Saint-Paul-de-Vence, the Colombe d'Or Hotel. If you ever go to Saint-Paul-de-Vence hotel, maybe you'll stay in this very hotel, and this isn't the dining room. And it shows German officers of Reserve Division 148 looking at a map at the time that the fighting in Villeneuve-Loubet was happening. During this fighting, about at least 16 or 17 Germans were killed, and there were dozens and dozens of prisoners taken by the Americans. So, as this picture was taken, some of the units were basically being wiped out. This shows American paratroopers of the 517th between La Roquette and Le Vence. This shows the bridge at Carros. It's called Le Pont de la Manda. As you can see, it was destroyed by the fighting or by the Germans. And this bridge was at this bridge, the first American soldiers crossed the Var River. One of them was called Leslie Perkins, and I was lucky enough to interview him. He only died about 2 or 3 years ago. So the Americans disguised as civilians and walked along this bridge, crossed the Var River, apparently killed a German, and then returned to the other side. These are very famous pictures of the first Allied troops arriving in Nice. And this is a less famous picture, also taken in Nice, that shows the revenge that was taken as soon as Nice was liberated. But it was the same in every French town. The women that had German boyfriends that had been prostitutes, had slept with the Germans, they were shaved, and as you can see, there was also swastikas drawn on their foreheads. And this is taken in front of the Italian consulate in Nice. This is the Promenade des Anglais. If you've ever visited Nice as a tourist, you must have walked down this place. In the background here, it's the Negresco Hotel, which is still a famous landmark. And this is also the location where a truck ran over about 100 people and killed 100 people during a terrorist attack a few years ago. This shows the first paratroopers of the 551st Parachute Infantry Battalion arriving in La Turbie, near Monte Carlo. I was lucky to have known this man, Charles Callery, a Frenchman, a local Frenchman who took great risks to help the first American paratroopers and guide them. This is him again, around 2012 or something, holding the American flag. And another guy here is Joe Ciccinelli, one of the veterans of the 551st. Both of them were involved with killing 3 German soldiers in La Turbie. This shows the Col de Brosse, which is a mountain pass where the 517th was involved in heavy fighting. You can see there's these switchbacks on the road to be able to drive up the mountain. And this is the summit of Col de Brosse with one of the American officers. This shows the Negresco Hotel that I spoke about before. It still exists today. It's almost exactly the same. Nothing has changed. All these are officers of the 509th. And I think pretty much all of them were wounded during the Battle of the Bulge just a couple of months later. This shows troopers of the 517th at the village of Peracava at the French barracks there. This is in Marvin Moles that we mentioned before in another picture. And this other guy here is Guy Carr. And a few days later, he stepped on a mine and had his foot amputated. And Marvin Moles received a Silver Star for helping him out of the minefields. And if you want to know more about Marvin Moles, you can also watch one of my other videos, because I actually found his helmet in southern France. So it's the Marvin Moles helmet story. Now to get to the conclusion of the video. These are German troops in Coquade Cemetery, burying dead Germans that were found in the sea. Sailors, as you can see, the sailors are putting the bodies in the ground. This is Coquade Cemetery at the time. In the foreground there's Italian graves from the Italian occupation, and then in the background German graves from the German period of the occupation. This is the German cemetery that was in Sospel. And this is not a cemetery made by the Germans. This cemetery was made by the French. They dug up all the dead German bodies they found around Sospel after the war and improvised this cemetery. This is the American cemetery at Draguignan. And although it was an American cemetery, well, the Americans also buried Canadians and Italians and Germans there. And this, according to the veteran who sent me the picture, were German bodies that were being buried. This is the same cemetery. In the background you can see white crosses for the Americans, and in the foreground you can see these little sticks, and that's for German soldiers. This is the funeral of a soldier of the 141st Infantry Regiment who was killed near the village of Théoul on August 16, 1944. His name was Willard Meek. And you can see there's veterans of the First World War, and then younger guys, probably World War II veterans, carrying the coffin to his local cemetery. This is the same thing, a paratrooper of the 517th who was killed during the attack on Saint-Césaire-sur-Siagne, being buried in his local cemetery. His name was J.B. Hampton. And then this is another American, James Pacey of the 517th. You can see his mother visiting the grave after the war. And this guy was killed on a place called Hill 1098, and he was not in a foxhole, but in a sanger, because you couldn't dig up in the mountains. It was solid rock, so the soldiers would build up foxholes with stones, and those are called sangers. And this guy was in his sanger, protected and stuff, and a German shell exploded near him. And according to what his friends told me, a tiny little fragment went between the rocks of a sanger and then hit him in the head, and that's how he was killed. This is a German family of soldier Herbert Becking, who was killed on September 21st, 1944. I don't know the details of his death, but what really shocked me when I received this picture for the first time is you can see this as a sad and destroyed family, and then you can see this guy who's probably his brother, and you can see his brother survived but with an arm amputated, and I find it really sad to see that. And then this last picture shows the parents of soldier Johann Mehr. He was the guy who was in that SS boat in Villefranche-sur-Mer. And what's also terrible with this picture is just to see the faces on the parents. This picture was taken in about after 1958, when the German War Graves Commission started regrouping all the bodies from southern France in this cemetery in Denier. So that's it for all these pictures. All the pictures were taken from, or almost all the pictures were taken from my book, Autopsy of a Battle. So if you want to know more details, you can buy my book, and lots of the interviews of these people and stuff are all included. I hope you enjoyed this video, and see you for the next video.